أَحَسِبَ النَّاسَ أَن يُتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. Does man think that he will be left on saying, I believe or we believe, and they will not be tested? He mentions another ayah, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى حَرْفٍ. There are some people who worship Allah as if on an edge. As if on an edge. فَإِنْ أَصَابَهُ خَيْرٌ اطْمَأَنَّ بِهِ وَإِنْ أَصَابَتْهُ فِتْنَةٌ انقلب على وجهه خسر الدنيا والآخرة ذلك هو الخسران المبين. So some people are basically, they worship Allah as if on an edge. If some harm comes to him, some calamity, if some goodness comes to him, then he is satisfied and happy. And if some hardship comes to him, he turns on his face, meaning he turns on his face, and he will lose the world and the hereafter, and that is the tremendous, clear loss. So meaning that some people either have no faith, the hypocrites, or they have a very weak type of iman. Their worship of Allah is as if on an edge. They don't really have a tight connection with Allah. They are weak in their obligations. They're weak in their fawa'id. And they don't turn to Allah. They don't basically take the time to acquire knowledge and to increase their iman. And they continue pursuing their life, preoccupied in the worldly affairs, paying little attention to themselves, to the iman, to their children. So the connection to the deen, connection to Allah is very, very weak. This person is in great danger. Because when the trial and tribulation comes, right, that worldly tribulation, maybe the loss of a family member, maybe some hardship or trial in terms of wealth, maybe some harm that comes from another Muslim or a non-Muslim, and that basically destroys his deen. Why? Because he was only worshipping Allah as if upon an edge. He never took his deen seriously. He never cared for his iman. He never strengthened his iman, and he continues, living his life like this. These types of people are those who will, be afflicted by these types of trials and tribulations. The Shaykh goes on to, and this also applies to people nowadays who become, they become atheists, and their atheism is not because, it's because they had a very traumatic experience. A lot of this atheism and apostasy is coming because of Muslims who didn't really have any attachment to the religion. They were upon ignorance, don't really know anything, don't have any fiqh of the religion, and their family not really practicing. Then they undergo some trauma, some traumatic experience, some dispute with the parents, or the culture of their people oppressed them and took away their rights, right? And they were put to trial by this, and then they left Islam on very flimsy and very weak grounds. A lot of this atheism, a lot of this apostasy is coming from this particular angle. And many of these people, you will see many of them were previously Rafida from Iran, Batiniya. Many of them had these very bad experiences in their country with a religion which is mubaddal, muharraf, an altered, distorted religion, nothing to do with Islam. And they had these experiences, and then they turned to apostasy. Many of them are people of shahawat. They've been taken in by the glitter, by the liberalism and the fact that you can follow your shahawat, right? And they're driven, but that's the real reason why they're driven towards apostasy. Because they believe that the ahkam of the Sharia are restricting them, restricting their shahawat. And that's the real reason. And they had no connection with religion. And they didn't bother to, learn iman and to strengthen their iman. And so when they see all of this glitter, this apparent joy, this apparent pleasure that non-Muslims seem to be having, with the alcohol, with the sexual liberation, with whatever else, all of this is just glitter. That's all it is on the surface. So they have shahawat and they see this is freedom. Right? And that's the real reason. Then the rational arguments come afterwards. That's a lot of apostasy is explained by like this. And you will know this is true because when you look at some of the individual examples or cases of these people, you have some, young girl ends up in, from Saudi Arabia to Thailand, and when she's there, she's being sexually abused and manipulated by others, and she's made to believe this is freedom. It's all shahwa and hawa. And then you see that, she's given asylum in some of these Western nations, and then the arguments start coming afterwards, the rational arguments, right? This is no different, for example, when, and this is how people tend to buy things as well. You go and you see something, and you want to buy this thing because of emotion. There's an emotional, you think, I must have this, and it's all emotional reasons, whether it's a dress, whether it's some piece of technology, or whether it's something else. It's really an emotional reason. And then your mind starts bringing all the rational arguments in order to justify that emotional impulse. So the purchase is really, it's an emotional impulse, that's all it is. And then your mind is able to start bringing all these rational arguments why I should do it. It's the same with apostates and atheists. That's how they are really working, right? That does not mean that some atheists and apostates do not have what they believe to be rational arguments. They do. But for a lot of them, or most of them, it is purely emotional. It's purely emotional. And many of them come from these backgrounds. Was a Rafidi, some woman living in Iran, being oppressed because of the oppressive way that the Rafida, treat women, enter into mut'ah with them and this and whatever, right? And then they just revolt against this, what's in this society, and they're right to do that. But then they, believe that this is Islam and this is what Islam teaches. It's not. It's purely an emotional reaction. Or some woman, from some of the African countries, she's undergone FGM, and she's extremely angry and mad at her culture, her society, and she blames it upon Islam, right? She becomes an apostate now. And so behind all of this apostasy is people who either had no iman to begin with, or they had very weak iman, or they come from these backgrounds of bid'ah, dalala, inhiraf, and that's all it is. So these types of people are the ones who very, very quickly, they will abandon iman, they will enter into apostasy, or they will become extremely, extremely weak as soon as a trial comes to them. As soon as a trial or tribulation comes to them. The Shaykh then goes on to mention another ayah, ما كان الله ليذر المؤمنين على ما أنتم عليه حتى يميز الخبيث من الطيب وما كان الله ليطلعكم على الغيب. Allah is not going to leave the believers upon what they are, upon the state that they are in, until He separates between the khabith, the vile, the filthy, the evil, and the tayyib, from the tayyib, the wholesome, the good. And Allah is not going to, let you see what is in the unseen. So again, it is a must that the people are separated, so that the khabith is on one side and the tayyib is on the other side. The Shaykh mentions hadith, أشد الناس بلاء الأنبياء عليهم الصلاة والسلام ثم الأمثل فالأمثل يبتلى المؤمن على حسب إيمانه. The most severe of people put to trial are the prophets. Upon them be the salat and salam, and then those like them, and then those like them. A believer is put to trial in accordance with his iman. And likewise, he mentions another narration, إِنَّ اللَّهَ إِذَا أَحَبَّ قَوْمًا ابْتَلَاهُمْ. Indeed, Allah, when He loves the people, He puts them to trial. فَمَنْ رَضِيَ فَلَهُ الرِّضَى وَمَنْ سَخِطَ فَعَلَيْهِ السَّخَطُ. So a person who is pleased with this trial and this tribulation, and he passes through it and he's pleased, then Allah will be pleased with him. And the one who becomes angry as a result of this trial, then upon him will be the anger. So the point being, the Shaykh explains, the world is a place of trial and tribulation. This is the sunnah of Allah Azza wa Jal in His creation, that He tests the servants with each other, and He tests them with hardships, calamities, difficulties. And then He mentions the ayah in the Quran, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ the ayah in the Quran, مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. We shall indeed put you to trial with something of fear. So the fear is mentioned first, and hunger, and decrease in wealth, and loss of life, and in fruits. And give glad tidings to the sabirin, those who are patient, those who when a calamity afflicts them, they say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un.